And as we approached the headquarters of his secret police, we saw a dozen or so corpses, including the body of a boy not more than 12, lying next to one of the drain gutters, covered with flies. It was in this blood-stained gutter that prisoners were killed, after being forced to lie down in the drain so their blood would not stain the premises. The next victim was forced to carry the previous corpse to the pile at the side of the building, then climb into the gutter himself. When Tanzanian troops broke into the subterranean dungeons of the compound, Tanzanian officials said they found 6 prisoners still alive. The 6 had been without any food for several weeks, and had survived by eating human flesh. Idi Amin Dada, a name synonymous with tyranny and terror, ruled Uganda from 1971 to 1979. His reign is remembered for its brutal authoritarianism, economic mismanagement, and the profound human suffering it caused. Emerging from the shadows of a post-colonial power struggle, Amin seized control in a military coup, plunging Uganda into a dark era marked by pervasive fear, rampant violence, and the staggering loss of 500,000 lives. Born in 1925 in the remote village of Kaboku, Amin's father abandoned the family early on, leaving his upbringing largely to his mother, who practiced witchcraft and pagan blood magic. Amin joined the British colonial army as a cook in 1946. His robust physical presence and assertive demeanor quickly propelled him through the ranks, setting the groundwork for his future rule over Uganda. Amin's initial role as a cook in the King's African Rifles was typical for locals in the British colonial army, where opportunities for more direct military involvement were limited. However, his robust physique and proficiency during physical training and drills quickly attracted the attention of his superiors. Amin's transition from the kitchen to the battlefield was catalyzed by the British colonial strategy of gradually transitioning power and military responsibilities to the local people. This shift in policy provided Amin with his first significant opportunity for advancement during military operations against the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya. Serving with notable distinction in these operations, he demonstrated a commanding presence and effectiveness in combat that facilitated his rapid progression from a support role to active military service. Uganda was granted its independence from the United Kingdom in 1962, with Milton Obote as the country's first prime minister. The new central government faced immediate challenges, particularly with the Buganda monarchy, the largest traditional tribal kingdom in Uganda, which had a tense relationship with the central authority and enjoyed certain privileges as a semi-autonomous state that other regions did not. This friction would later contribute to the national instability that Amin would exploit to seize power. In 1966, the tensions between the central government and the Buganda monarchy escalated significantly. President Obote suspended the constitution and ousted the Buganda king, King Mutisa, from his governmental role. The following year, Obote introduced a new constitution that transformed Uganda into a republic and effectively dissolved the traditional tribal monarchies. This consolidated his power as the nation's president. In 1970, to curb the rampant crime, Obote launched a disarmament campaign, seizing arms and neutralizing potential civilian opposition, and ensuring that resistance to his rule could not easily materialize into an armed uprising. President Obote's hold on power grew increasingly autocratic. His consolidation of power sparked significant unrest among various tribal and political groups. They felt marginalized and oppressed under his regime. As tensions escalated, divisions within the military, exacerbated by ethnic loyalties and dissatisfaction with Obote's leadership, became more pronounced. Idi Amin had risen to prominence within the Ugandan military and developed his own substantial following among the soldiers. He exploited these rifts. By 1971, the brewing discontent culminated into a decisive military coup. With the backing of both disgruntled military factions and civilian supporters, Amin successfully deposed Obote, seizing control of Uganda. Amin wasted no time in establishing his dominion, with a series of swift and severe measures aimed at consolidating his authority and eliminating any opposition. One of his first actions was to purge the military and government of Obote loyalists and any potential threats to his rule. This purge quickly extended to include members of rival tribes and political figures who were seen as dissenters. Public executions became a common spectacle, serving both as a method of instilling fear and a stark warning to anyone who might consider opposing him. Amin's rule was not only marked by severe political repression, but also by catastrophic economic policies. One of his most disastrous economic decisions was the expulsion of Asian Indian Ugandans in 1972. Amin accused the South Asian Indian community of economic sabotage and exploitation, subsequently expelling 80,000 people and seizing their businesses and properties. However, the businesses languished and deteriorated under government control. Additionally, Amin's regime was characterized by widespread mismanagement of the agricultural sector, which had been the backbone of Uganda's economy. His interference in agriculture, including the allocation of farms to military officers, resulted in a sharp decline in productivity. This led to food shortages, turning Uganda from a food exporter into a country struggling with famine and relying on international aid. Simultaneously, Amin moved to cement his control by setting up a formidable state security mechanism. He established military units like the State Research Bureau and the Public Safety Unit, which operated as his personal instruments of repression. These agencies were notorious for their brutal tactics, which include arbitrary detention, torture, disappearing individuals, and executing enemies of the state. Under Amin's directives, these groups played a central role in maintaining his grip on power through fear and violence. Adjacent to Idi Amin's presidential palace in Nakasero, Kampala, was the notorious State Research Bureau headquarters, which also functioned as a secret detention and torture center. This facility was infamous for the horrendous torture and executions carried out within, serving as a grim symbol of Amin's regime. To facilitate his direct involvement in the operations of the camp, a secret tunnel was constructed that connected the palace to the facility, allowing Amin discreet access. Eyewitness accounts from survivors and former guards describe the harrowing scenes within the SRB, where Amin would often employ brutal torture techniques as part of his interrogation process, including physical beatings, electrocution, water torture, burning, mutilation, psychological torture, and Amin himself was known to use a sledgehammer to end the life of the prisoners he personally tortured. Amin's unpredictable behavior and human rights abuses strained his standing with Western governments. As his relationships with the West deteriorated, Amin turned to Colonel Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and the Soviet Union for support. Both were more than willing to fill the void left by departing Western influence. Gaddafi, seeking to expand his influence in Africa and promote his vision of Pan-Arabism, saw Amin as a useful ally. Libya provided substantial financial aid and military support to the Amin regime. In October of 1978, Ugandan forces under Amin's orders launched an invasion into the Kagera region of Tanzania. This aggressive move was partly motivated by Amin's desire to divert attention from Uganda's internal problems and assert military dominance in the region. In response, Tanzania mobilized its army and counterattacked. Supported by Ugandan exiles who sought to restore democracy in Uganda, the Tanzanian forces steadily pushed back the Ugandan military. By April of 1979, the Tanzanian army and rebels had reached Kampala, Uganda's capital, forcing Amin to flee the country. After being ousted from power, Amin sought sanctuary in Libya. However, his stay there was short-lived. Seeking a more permanent refuge, he moved on to Saudi Arabia in the early 1980s. The Saudi government granted him asylum, and he lived quietly in Jeddah, largely keeping out of the public eye under the condition that he refrained from political activities. During this time in exile, Amin led a relatively secluded life, maintaining a low profile and occasionally receiving visitors, including journalists and former associates. His health gradually deteriorated, and he passed away in August of 2003. Amin's 8-year rule from 1971 to 1979 was marked by profound human rights abuses and severe mismanagement, leading to the deaths of 500,000 Ugandans. His reign of terror destabilized not only Uganda, but also the broader East African region, and left a legacy of volatility that persisted long after his departure. The brutal tactics and economic decline under his regime left deep scars on Uganda, undermining the nation's development and fostering a climate of fear and mistrust that would take decades to heal. His overthrow and subsequent exile ended a dark chapter in Ugandan history, but the impact of his dictatorship continues to be felt in the region's ongoing struggle for stability and reconciliation. About a week after the pastors were placed in the dungeon, the soldiers came down again as usual. This time there was a huge man with them who looked like a giant gorilla with hair all over his body. Hair was even growing on his forehead down to the eyebrows. With his very short neck and wide, powerful frame, you almost thought he was a gorilla. When he entered the tunnel, the prisoners screamed and ran back in terror. Some fell on the ground in shock as he approached them. The men could hardly breathe as they pressed against each other, trying to get away from this monster. He called himself Simba. As Simba looked around at the men, he grabbed one that had fallen to the floor and picked him up, saying, "Simba is hungry. Simba, eat." While forcing the men to watch, he began to cut the unconscious man's abdomen open, removing his heart. While blood was running from his mouth and down his chest, he would laugh and begin to eat. It was worse than you could ever imagine hell to be like watching this demon-possessed beast. We understood later he would remove heart, kidneys, and the liver from each of those he killed, believing that in doing so, he would eliminate their spirits from tormenting him in the future. Simba paid a visit 4 or 5 more times during the time the pastors faced certain torture and death. After 22 days, only 10 remained alive, all knowing they had no chance of survival unless God had mercy on them. Thank you for watching this episode of Tyrants in Tyranny. These stories, while difficult, are crucial. They remind us of the vigilance needed to protect our societies from falling into the hands of tyranny again. If this content resonates with you, or you feel it's important that these narratives are shared and remembered, consider supporting this channel through Patreon. Your support not only helps keep this channel alive, but also contributes to a broader understanding and awareness of historical truths. We're in this together, and it's by supporting one another that we ensure the past does not repeat itself. Stay informed, stay connected, and most importantly, take care of yourselves.